Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
When the war started, the son Savage, who was 33 years old, joined the army, leaving his mother alone in the house. People didn't feel sorry for the old woman because she had money. Everyone knew that. Mother Savage kept living in her house. Soon, it was covered in snow. She came to the village once a week to buy bread and a little meat. Then, she went back home. People said there were wolves around, so she walked with a gun on her shoulder, her son's old, rusty gun. It looked strange to see the tall Savage walking slowly through the snow with the gun, which stuck out past her black headscarf. She always kept her white hair hidden, and no one had ever seen it. One day, a group of Prussian soldiers came to the village. The soldiers stayed in people's houses based on how much property and food each person had. For soldiers stayed with the old woman because everyone knew she had money. These 4 soldiers were big, strong men with light skin, blonde beards, and blue eyes. Even though they had been through a lot, they still looked healthy. Even though they were in a country they had conquered, they were kind and gentle. They were very nice to the old woman, trying not to make her spend much money or do too much work. You could see them every morning washing themselves at the well. They would roll up their sleeves and splash water on their pink-white skin as the sun was just rising. While they cleaned up, the old woman, La Mère Savage, would walk around, preparing their soup. They would also help her clean the kitchen, wash the floors, chop wood, peel potatoes, and do all the housework. It was as if they were 4 good sons helping their mother. But the old woman always thought about her own son. He was tall and thin, with a hooked nose, brown eyes, and a thick black mustache. Every day, she asked the soldiers, "Do you know where the French marching regiment, number 23, went? My boy is in it." The soldiers always answered, "No, we don't know." They understood her worry because they had mothers back home too. They helped her with many small things. She liked them, even though they were her enemies. The peasants, the poor people, didn't hate their enemies the way rich people did. The poor people suffered the most in war, and they didn't care about the reasons for it or about honor. In the village, people said, "Those 4 Germans with La Mère Savage are lucky. They found an easy place to stay." One morning, when the old woman was alone, she saw a man coming toward her house from far away. She knew him. It was the postman bringing letters. He gave her a piece of folded paper, and she put on her glasses, which she used for sewing. Then she read, "Madame Savage, this letter is to tell you sad news. Your boy, Victor, was killed yesterday by a shell which almost cut him in 2. I was near him when it happened, and he told me about you. He asked me to let you know if anything happened to him. I took his watch from his pocket. I will bring it back to you when the war is over. César Rivet, Soldier of the 2nd Class, March. Reg number 23. The letter was written 3 weeks earlier. The old woman didn't cry at first. She stood still, too shocked to feel anything. She thought, Now Victor is dead." Then, slowly, tears came to her eyes and sadness filled her heart. Her painful thoughts came one by one. She would never kiss her child again, her big boy, never again. The police had killed the father, and now the Prussians had killed the son. He had been cut in two by a cannonball. She could imagine the terrible thing, his head falling, his eyes open, and him chewing his mustache as he did when he was angry. What had they done with her son's body after he died? If only they had brought him back to her, like they had brought back her husband, with the bullet in his forehead. But then she heard voices. The Prussians were coming back from the village. She quickly hid the letter in her pocket and wiped her eyes, trying to look normal. The soldiers were laughing and looked happy because they had caught a rabbit, most likely stolen, and they showed it to her with big smiles. They were excited about the meal they were going to have. She started preparing breakfast right away, but when it came time to kill the rabbit, she couldn't do it. Her heart felt too heavy. Even though it wasn't the first time, she couldn't handle it today. One of the soldiers killed the rabbit by hitting it behind the ears. Once the rabbit was dead, she skinned it, but the sight of the blood on her hands made her tremble. She kept thinking about her son, imagining him bloody, like the rabbit. She sat at the table with the soldiers, but she couldn't eat. They ate the rabbit without noticing her sadness. She watched them without saying anything, her face calm, so they didn't realize how she felt. Suddenly, she said, "I don't even know your names, and we've been together for a whole month." It took them a moment to understand what she meant, but then they told her their names. That wasn't enough for her, so she asked them to write their names and their families' addresses on a piece of paper. She put on her glasses, looked at the strange handwriting, folded the paper, and put it in her pocket next to the letter about her son's death. When the meal was over, she told the soldiers, "I'm going to help you." She began to carry hay up to the loft where the soldiers slept. They were surprised that she was working so hard, but she explained that it would keep them warm. They helped her stack the hay high up to the roof, creating a cozy room with walls of hay that smelled good and would be warm for sleeping. At dinner, one of the soldiers noticed that La Mère Sauvage still wasn't eating. He asked if she was okay, and she said her stomach hurt. She made a big fire to warm herself, and then the 4 German soldiers climbed up the ladder to their sleeping area, like they did every night. As soon as they closed the trapdoor, the old woman took the ladder away. Then she opened the outside door quietly and went to get more straw, filling her kitchen with it. She walked barefoot in the snow so no one would hear her. She listened carefully to the sounds of the soldiers snoring as they slept. When she was ready, she threw some of the straw into the fireplace. Once it caught fire, she spread the burning straw over the rest of the bundles in the kitchen. Then she stepped outside again to watch. In just a few moments, the whole inside of the cottage was filled with bright flames. It turned into a giant furnace, and the light from the fire shone out of the small window and onto the snow outside. Then she heard the soldiers screaming from the top of the house, their voices full of fear and pain. The trapdoor gave way, and a whirlwind of fire shot up into the loft, burning through the straw roof. The fire rose high into the sky like a giant torch, and the whole cottage was on fire. Nothing more could be heard except the crackling of the fire, the breaking of the walls, and the falling of the roof beams. Suddenly, the roof collapsed, and the burning house sent a great shower of sparks into the air, mixed with a cloud of smoke. The countryside, all white with snow, glowed in the light of the fire, shining like silver, but now tinted with red from the flames. Far away, a bell began to ring. The old woman, La Mère Sauvage, stood in front of her burning house, holding her gun, her son's gun, ready in case one of the men tried to escape. When she saw that it was over, she threw the gun into the fire. There was a loud explosion as the gun went off. People were coming now, the local villagers and the Prussian soldiers. They found the old woman sitting calmly on a tree trunk, looking content. A German officer, who spoke French very well, asked her, "Where are your soldiers?" She pointed her bony arm toward the red pile of burning wood and answered in a strong voice, "There." Everyone crowded around her. The Prussian officer asked, "How did the fire start?" "I set it on fire," she said. They didn't believe her at first. They thought that the shock of the fire had made her crazy. As the crowd listened, she told the whole story, from the moment she received the letter about her son to the last cries of the soldiers who burned with the house. She didn't leave out a single detail. When she finished, she took 2 pieces of paper from her pocket and put on her glasses again to read them by the light of the fire. Then she said, showing 1 piece of paper, "This is about the death of my son, Victor." Then she showed the other paper and pointed to the burned house, saying, "These are the names of the soldiers. You should write to their families." She handed the paper to the officer, who held her by the shoulders. She continued, "You must write to their mothers and tell them that I did this. I, Victoire Simon, La Sauvage. Don't forget." The officer gave orders in German. The soldiers grabbed her and pushed her against the hot walls of the house. Then 12 men lined up in front of her, about 20 steps away. She did not move. She knew what was going to happen, and she waited. The officer gave the command, and a long gunshot rang out. One more shot fired a little later, after the others. The old woman did not fall right away. She sank down slowly, as if her legs had been cut from under her. The Prussian officer came closer. She had been almost cut in 2 by the bullets, and in her old hand, she still held the letter, now covered in blood. "My friend Serval added. As a way of getting back at her, the Germans destroyed the chateau in our district, the one that belonged to me." I thought of the mothers of those 4 soldiers who burned in that house, and of the horrible bravery of that other mother who was shot against the wall. I picked up a little stone, still blackened by the flame.